You know, it's funny how hopelessness has a specific smell. For me, it smelled like chicken-flavored ramen noodles and the stale air of my cramped on-campus apartment, a place you could barely call home. I was just another college kid in Chicago, drowning in debt and caffeine, trying to survive a literature degree while working a coffee shop job for a wage that barely covered rent. Every day was a repeat of the last. Classes, work, studying until my eyes burned, and the constant anxiety in the pit of my stomach, a knot that never loosened, reminding me of the terrifying size of my student loan. I saw the future not as a horizon of possibilities, but as a deep, dark abyss, and I was running toward it with no brakes. It was on a grey afternoon in October, with rain streaking the cafe window, that I saw it. Pinned to the community notice board, between yoga class ads and local band flyers, was a piece of paper that looked completely out of place. It was a simple flyer, printed on high-quality white stock with a stark black, serious font. No pictures, no catchy slogans, just text. Participants needed for sleep study. Compensation, $5,000 for 1 week. $5,000. The number glowed on the page, almost outshining everything else. It felt like a typo. I read the fine print. The study required complete isolation for 7 days in a private research facility. Participants would be monitored during sleep and required to report their experiences upon waking. There was a phone number at the bottom. The paper felt cool and smooth to the touch, unlike the other crumpled flyers. It was professional, almost clinical, and that should have been the first red flag. But the truth is, when you're drowning, you don't question the hand that reaches for you, even if it feels a little strange. $5,000 wasn't just a help. It was a lifeboat. It meant rent for months, real food, maybe even replacing my laptop that sounded like a jet engine about to explode. I called that same day. The voice on the other end of the line was calm, neutral, devoid of any emotion. He introduced himself as an assistant at the Somnus Research Institute. He asked me a series of odd questions about my sleep habits, my family history of mental illness, and whether I held any strong religious beliefs. I lied on a few parts, downplaying my anxiety-induced nights of insomnia. I wanted that money. I was approved. My isolation would begin the following Monday. The Somnus facility was in a forgotten part of the city, a windowless brick building squeezed between a derelict warehouse and a train yard. There was no sign, just a small polished metal S on the steel door. The air inside was cold and smelled of ozone and lemon-scented cleaner, a scent so sterile it felt like it was sucking all the oxygen out of the room. I was greeted by a tall, thin man with impeccably combed grey hair and thin-rimmed glasses. He introduced himself as Dr. Alistair Finch. His handshake was firm, but his eyes were like 2 chips of ice. He didn't smile. Not once. He led me down a silent, white corridor. Our footsteps echoed unnervingly. The walls were padded, and the carpet was so thick it seemed to swallow the sound. He explained the rules in his precise, monotone voice. Rule 1. Total isolation. I would have no contact with any other participant. Meals would be delivered through a small hatch in my door. Rule 2. A strict schedule. Lights out at 10 p.m. Wake up at 6 a.m. No exceptions. Rule 3. Every night, a nurse would attach electrodes to my head to monitor my brain activity. Rule 4, the most important one. Every morning, I would have a session with him to report in detail any dream I'd had. My personal belongings, including my phone and laptop, were confiscated and locked in a safe. They provided me with white pajamas, slippers, and a few approved books, all non-fiction, mostly dry philosophy and psychology texts. My room, number 4, was as impersonal as the rest of the place. A bed, a small desk, a chair, and a black security camera mounted in the corner of the ceiling. The only window was a pane of frosted glass high up on the wall, which allowed no view of the outside. The door locked behind me with a heavy, final click. The silence was absolute, a pressure on my eardrums. It was the quietest place I had ever been. That first night, as the nurse, a woman with a face that looked carved from stone, fixed the cold electrodes to my scalp, I felt a pang of regret. I was completely at their mercy. But then I thought of the $5,000 and told myself it was just for a week. The first night was uneventful. I dreamed of mundane things, the coffee shop where I worked, a boring lecture conversation. In the morning, I reported it all to Dr. Finch over an intercom on the wall. He listened patiently, taking notes, his voice never betraying any emotion. "Excellent, Mr. Evans. Details are crucial." The second night was the same. Fragmented, nonsensical dreams. I started to think this was going to be the easiest money I'd ever made. It was on the third night that things started to change. I was in a deep sleep when a sound woke me. It was faint, muffled by the thick walls, but unmistakable. A whimper, a sound of pain that turned into a low sob and then silence. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. The sound seemed to come from the room next to mine, number 5. I tried to convince myself it was just the building's old plumbing, or maybe part of my own dream. The next morning, when Dr. Finch asked about my dreams, I hesitated. I think I heard something last night," I said. His reply was immediate and cold. "Your sole responsibility, Mr. Evans, is to focus on your own internal experience. External noises are irrelevant." His voice had a finality that warned me not to press the issue. On the fourth night, the sound came back, but this time it wasn't a whimper. It was a scream, a sharp, terrified scream that was cut off abruptly, as if a hand had been clamped over someone's mouth. I shot out of bed, cold sweat trickling down my back. I pressed my ear to the cold wall, but all I heard was the heavy silence and the thrumming of my own blood. There was no mistaking that. It was the sound of pure terror. What the hell was happening in the next room? In the morning, I was determined to confront him. "I heard a scream," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "Someone screamed in the room next door." Dr. Finch sighed, an almost imperceptible sound of irritation. "As I said before, Mr. Evans, external stimuli are not part of this study. Please report your dream." He was a brick wall of denial. I felt powerless, trapped, and for the first time truly afraid. I spent the day in a state of growing paranoia. The camera in the corner seemed to follow me. The food, always bland and tasteless, suddenly seemed suspect. I picked up one of the books from the shelf, a collection of essays by Carl Jung, and a line jumped out at me. "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The darkness. That's exactly where I was. In a lightless place where the darkness was becoming conscious in ways I couldn't understand. I started thinking. The isolation, the insistence on dreams, the denial of the screams. None of it made sense for a simple sleep study. Unless sleep wasn't the point. Unless the dreams were the tool for something else. The fifth night was hell. The screaming started earlier, around 1 a.m., but it didn't stop. It went on, interspersed with desperate pleading. "Please stop, get out of my head, no, please don't make me see that." The voice was a woman's, raw with an agony that tore through me. And then I heard something else. A low, pulsing hum coming through the wall, like the thrum of a machine. I slammed my fist on the wall. "Hey, are you okay in there?" I shouted. The woman's scream stopped instantly. The hum of the machine ceased. And then a voice answered over the intercom in my room, the calm, icy voice of Dr. Finch. "Mr. Evans, this is your final warning. One more breach of the rules and your contract will be terminated without payment." That's when it all clicked into place with terrifying clarity. They weren't studying dreams. They were inducing them, or rather, nightmares. They were doing something to those people in their sleep, invading their minds, and the screams were the result. I was the control group, the baseline. My only function was to provide a foundation of normal dreams to compare against whatever they were doing to the others. The $5,000 wasn't a payment, it was hush money. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I just sat on my bed, staring at the camera, my body trembling. I had to get out. But how? The door was locked. I was a prisoner. The next morning, during our daily debrief, I changed tactics. I lied. I described a horrific nightmare I'd invented on the spot, filled with monsters and chases. I watched Dr. Finch. For the first time, I saw a flicker in his eyes. interest. "Fascinating," he murmured. "Describe the texture of the creature's claws." In that moment, I knew I was right. They were looking for something, and my fabricated nightmares were close to it. On the 6th night, I put my plan into action. I needed a distraction, something to get me out of the room. After the nurse attached the electrodes and left, I waited an hour. Then I started to scream, to thrash on the bed, faking a violent seizure. I tore the electrodes from my head. In less than a minute, the door flew open. The nurse and a massive security guard rushed in. "He's seizing," she yelled. As they leaned over me, I saw my chance. My door was open. I shoved the nurse, threw myself off the bed, and sprinted into the hall. The hallway was dark, lit only by faint emergency lights on the floor. I ran towards room 5. The door was ajar. The humming of the machine was loud now. I peered inside. The scene will haunt me forever. A woman lay on the bed, her body convulsing in a violent sleep. Electrodes covered her head, but these were connected not to a simple monitor, but to a complex machine beside the bed, a metal box of blinking lights and dials. Beside the machine stood Dr. Finch. He wasn't panicked. He was calm, adjusting one of the dials, his eyes fixed on a monitor that displayed chaotic brainwave patterns. He was piloting her nightmare. He heard me. He turned slowly, and his face showed not surprise, but faint disappointment, like a teacher whose favorite student has let him down. "Mr. Evans," he said, his voice as calm as ever. "I expected more from you." The security guard grabbed me from behind, his arms like steel clamps. "What? What are you doing?" I stammered. Finch adjusted his glasses. "Progress, my boy. We are mapping the architecture of fear, learning to modulate consciousness. Imagine curing PTSD by removing the traumatic memory. Imagine teaching a surgeon complex procedures while they sleep. The potential is limitless." He glanced at the writhing woman. "Unfortunately, there are side effects in the early stages. Some minds are more resistant to recalibration." They dragged me back to my room. "Your role in this study has changed," Finch said from the doorway. "You are no longer a control. You have become an unexpected variable, and we cannot have variables in the outside world." He smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. "Now we'll get the chance to see how a curious mind like yours reacts to a more direct stimulus." The door closed. The click of the lock sounded like a death sentence. I don't know how long I've been here. The days and nights blur into a cycle of forced sleep and debriefings. They don't ask me about my dreams anymore. They tell me what my dreams were. They show me images on a screen, dark forests, distorted faces, endless hallways, and ask me how I felt. They are using me as a laboratory, tweaking their machines, refining their techniques. Sometimes they make mistakes. Sometimes the nightmare spills over into my waking hours, and I see things in the corners of my room. The worst part is that sometimes it works. Sometimes they give me good dreams. Dreams of my old life, of the sun on my face, of the smell of real coffee. And for a few moments, I forget where I am. And that is the real torture. To give me a glimpse of heaven before throwing me back into hell. They tell me my mind will adapt, that eventually I won't know the difference anymore, and that's why I'm telling you this. I don't know how this message is getting out. Maybe it's a dream. Maybe it's the one part of my mind they haven't been able to touch yet. One last act of rebellion before the darkness takes it all. They can't have everything. They can't have this story. So, when you go to sleep tonight, when you close your eyes and surrender to the dark, think of me and ask yourself, are the dreams you're having truly your own? Or are they just echoes of someone else screaming in a quiet white room somewhere? Are you sure you're alone in your own mind? Do you really think this is just a story? If you've made it this far, maybe it's because a part of you knows the worst monsters aren't under your bed. They're already inside your head. If you believe something like this could be real, comment below and subscribe. If you want to hear more secrets that shouldn't be told, maybe it'll help keep me real for one more day.
If you enjoyed this creepy story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more chilling tales every week. Stay spooky!